Alright guys, we are back after UFC 300, this time to break down UFC Vegas 91, Nicolau versus Perez. It's going to be a main event in the UFC's flyweight division between the former title challenger and Alex Perez, coming off that decision loss to Muhammad Mokaev, taking on Matheus Nicolau. This is going to be a phenomenal main event in the flyweight division between the number 5 and number 8 ranked 125 pounders in the UFC, with some pretty big implications considering that we have the flyweight title main event on May 4th between Alexandre Pantoja, who's going to be defending his title against Steve Astro Boy Erceg. And then in the co-main event of the evening, you have a light heavyweight bout between the number 11 ranked Ryan Superman Spann taking on a powerful knockout artist and newcomer coming off a first-round knockout win as an underdog against Zach Pauga and Bogdan Gusov, who comes in with a record of 15 victories and only 3 defeats, 21 wins and 9 losses on the side of the man they call Superman. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. I'm not going to waste any time on this breakdown, guys. I'm not going to cover every single fight on the card, just because I just don't feel like there's a ton of fights on here that are worth covering, so this isn't going to be a full card breakdown. I'll give my thoughts on the fights I don't cover on this podcast in the description. It's probably the pinned comment of this video, but I am going to kick it off in the lightweight division between Gabriel Benitez taking on Maheshate. I think this is going to be a close fight, and I have some concerns when I look at the side of Maheshate. He is coming off of that knockout loss to Vyacheslav Borshchev, who caught him with a big left hook right hand. And, you know, losing to a guy like Slava Claus is not a bad thing. If you go back and you watch one of the best fights of last year between Nazim Sadykhov and Vyacheslav Borshchev, they went back and forth. Sadykhov dropped him with a big head kick, hurt him, rocked him, and then he came back heavy towards the late portion of the second and then won the third round. But the fight was a draw because of the 10-8 that Sadykhov got. I think Sadykhov actually got the 10-8 in round 2, dropping him with a head kick, hurting him. I mean, the fight should have been stopped, in my opinion, but I also did pick Sadykhov in that fight, so, you know, maybe I'm a little bit biased based off the prediction. But looking at this fight, I think Benitez is going to chop those low kicks. He's coming out of AKA, one of the hardest kickers at AKA, according to Cain Velasquez and Daniel Cormier, but he's going to be looking to chop that lead leg really to affect the boxing ability of Maheshate. Maheshate can kick. He has decent front kicks, some decent head kicks, but the majority of his success is going to come from his boxing. He hasn't had as much experience inside the UFC, so that is going to be on the side of Gabriel Mowgli Benitez. Benitez has good low kicks, really solid low kicks, decent boxing ability, and can mix up his wrestling and his takedowns as well. I think against a guy the caliber and as dangerous as Maheshate, using the grappling would probably be a good idea. Slow down Maheshate, counter the jab, get the timing on the jab, throw the low kick, throw the kicks to the body, and, you know, try to find openings to take the wind out of Maheshate and then use the grappling and top control the longer the fight goes. This is going to be a fight where I don't think it's a blowout either way. I think there are areas where Benitez can win. I think he's a lot more tested in the UFC, so you do have to have those concerns when looking at a guy like Maheshate, who technically only had a really solid win over Steve Garcia, who, yes, did come in and defeat both Machiazel Costa, I think I'm saying his name wrong, and also defeated Shailon Nerdambeka, where he was huge underdogs in both of those fights, at least based on the technical perspectives of the fight. He was expected to lose both of those, came in and won and got finishes in those fights. So having Maheshate have that knockout win, and it was a nasty little step back, fade back, rear angle right hand where he just caught him and knocked him out. I think Maheshate is going to be the fighter with the cleaner striking. I think Maheshate is going to be the fighter with cleaner counters, and we have seen a guy like Gabriel Benitez get hurt more in his UFC career than we have seen Maheshate, but at the same time, he does have a higher level of competition. I think using the wrestling and getting into the second and third round against Maheshate is where Benitez can really take over this fight. Like I said, I have my concerns. I have my, you know, fade backs and drawbacks on Maheshate as a fighter, But I think the boxing, I think the counter ability, I think the length and reach of a guy like Maheshate is going to be too much for Benitez, who gets hit, gets hurt, gets clipped, and can get finished. I expect a big counter from Maheshate with that right hand, or a left hook right hand, to land on the chin of Benitez, and Benitez to get folded and finished. I'm going to go with Maheshate to win this fight by a second round TKO. I just think he's going to be too powerful and too crisp with his boxing for a guy like Gabriel Benitez. But the longer the fight goes into the second, midpoint of the second and into the third, I think the UFC experience and the cardio advantage of Benitez is going to show its head and rear its head. But I think Maheshate finds the chin of Benitez, who's had his chin cracked before, and gets a finish. So give me Maheshate via second round TKO. Up next, we've got a battle in the lightweight division between a former Ultimate Fighter alum in Austin Thud Hubbard taking on Michael Figl, who's coming off that UFC debut loss to Perez, who's a very solid and technical Muay Thai striker. Looking at this fight, I'm going to be honest, there's nothing that really impresses me about Austin Hubbard as a fighter from a technical perspective. The thing that I think impresses me the most is his heart, his ability to push through, the ability to get into these wars and just drag it out and make it nasty and dirty. And I think that's how he beats a guy like Figl, who I think, is much more technical in every aspect of the game. I think he's more technical in the striking. I think he uses his length, uses his reach a little bit better, throws clean boxing combinations, and really can mix up the striking to the grappling transitions. Looking for takedowns, looking to transition to body locks, inside and outside trips, looking to get the opponent down, land ground and pound, looking to set up submissions. He's very active off of his back and from the top position on the mat. And I think that's an area where some people might give the advantage to Hubbard because they've seen him compete in the UFC more often. But I don't think Hubbard is very solid in any one area. He uses forward pressure. He puts combinations together well. He uses takedowns. He has ground and pound. He can go for subs, but it's really just the pressure and volume and overall just dirty, nasty, in-the-face fighting style of Austin Hubbard that slows down fighters and kind of causes Hubbard to break them the longer that fights go. But Michael Figl, I think he can hang with Hubbard in the grappling. I think he can hang with the cardio aspect of the fight if it does go into the second and the third round. I think he's the cleaner striker on the feet. I think he transitions between the striking and grappling better. And even if he does get taken down, he can use submissions. Like I said, throw up arm bars, throw up triangles, look to set up submissions on the top, look to land ground and pound. I think he's better than Hubbard everywhere this fight goes. And I really just don't think Hubbard is that I don't think Hubbard is that good, and I'm not trying to disrespect him. He's in the UFC, the toughest organization, left the UFC, came back on the Ultimate Fighter, got to the finale, so the guy does have good fighting ability, but there's no area in this fight where I think he's supremely better than a guy like Figl, who had some really tough fights in Cage Warriors and had some really good success in Cage Warriors as well. I think Figl is going to be able to win some scrambles against Austin Hubbard. I think he's going to land the cleaner shots on the feet. It's just going to come down to, can he keep that cardio up and the pace for 15 minutes? Because like I said, the longer the fight goes, it is going to play into the dirty, nasty, grinding style of a guy like Austin Hubbard. But I'm actually going to take Michael Figl via a ground and pound TKO, potentially a submission. I think that he's going to be able to secure better positions on the mat. I think he's going to win more scrambles in this fight than he loses, and I think he's more dangerous in looking to set up submissions. And we saw in the Ultimate Fighter finale, against Kurt Holloway, who is a very technical and solid jiu-jitsu fighter, he transitioned from an armbar to a triangle, and he really just got out-grappled the longer that fight went and got caught in positions where I think a guy like Figl can take advantage of as well. So I'm going to go with Michael Figl to get the job done here. I'm trying to think if it's going to be like a ground and pound TKO where he takes his back and flattens him out, or if it's going to be a submission. I'm going to go with the ground and pound TKO. I want to go with sub, but I don't think I want to go back-to-back sub losses for Hubbard. I just don't necessarily think it's going to be that, I don't think it's that likely, so I'm going to go with a ground and pound TKO. He flattens out Hubbard, gets that top position, tires him out, and lands ground and pound from the flattened out position on his back. So give me Michael Figl to get the job done here in the second round via TKO. I like him a lot in this spot, and I honestly just think he's the better fighter in every aspect of the game, and that's what it comes down to. So Figl, second round TKO. I think he's like minus 155. I like him a lot here, but Hubbard could come through and get something done here. He's not terrible. Up next, we move to a battle in the welterweight division between a UFC veteran with over almost 50 fights. Tim the Dirty Bird Means taking on a very talented striker and knockout artist in Uros the Dr. Medic. Medic versus Means is a really, really good matchup stylistically. I think that the better power is coming from Uros Medic. I think the speed advantage is on the side of Medic, the age, but the UFC experience, the veteranship, the gamesmanship, the technical aspects of the game from striking and grappling, I think that goes to Tim Means, man. If anybody's going to use grappling to win this fight, I think it comes from the Dirty Bird. He can use takedowns. He has been caught in submissions. He got submitted by Alex Morono with a front choke. He got submitted via a Darce choke from Kevin Holland, but that was after he got rocked on the feet. I think if Medic hurts him on the feet, he's not going to look to set up a submission. He's probably just going to look to put him out. Medic is going to be live to put out a guy like Tim Means, who has had his chin cracked before, but he seems to be kind of coming into his own recently in his UFC career. He has some losses, like I already discussed, but at the same time, I think he's a little bit better in terms of his overall game than Medic. I think he uses grappling better. I think he can resort to his wrestling if he needs to. I think he has the better cardio the longer the fight goes. And if the fight isn't going his way on the feet, like I said, he can resort to the grappling, the wrestling, the takedowns, the top pressure, looking to set up submissions of his own more than I think Medic can. Medic is going to want to stay on the outside, pick him apart, piece him up with the jab, the 1-2 down the middle, the left head kick, attacking the inside leg against, it's going to be same stance. So attacking the outside leg of Tim Means, throwing the 1-2 down the middle. But I think Means is a little bit sharper when it comes to the technical aspects of his striking, the 1-2s down the middle, the 2-3, the hook to the cross, the 3-2. But Medic is going to be faster. So the speed is probably going to be the biggest problem for Means. But I think if this fight gets out of the first round, I like Tim Means a lot more than I do early. I think if there's an early finish, it's probably Medic cracking him with a big left straight, a big left head kick, a big 1-2 down the middle, hurting him and just kind of jumping on him and finishing him, which Medic is definitely live to do here. But I think Means can push Medic. I think Means, like I said, can resort to his wrestling, can get takedowns, can get top control. And I don't think Medic has much to offer off of his back in terms of setting up submissions. So it would more be him trying to either control from the guard or look to get up to a hip, shrimp crawl out, work his way back up to the cage. Work his way back up using the cage and get back to the center and look to strike. The first round is going to be very dangerous for a guy like Means. And if Medic wins this fight, I think it is via first round knockout. But the longer the fight goes, I think the 1-2s, the boxing, the knees up the middle, the front kicks to the body, the potential for takedowns, cage pushing, cage wrestling, takedowns, and everything like that, I think that goes to Tim Means. And I'm going to take the over plus 200, the plus 250 underdog in Tim the Dirty Bird Means to get it done here. He has been knocked out before. We've seen him get hurt. We've seen him get subbed. We've seen him get finished. I would not be surprised in the slightest if Medic was just too quick for him and landed that 1-2, landed a head kick, landed a big right hook as Means stepped in and hurt him, or as Means stepped in and he hurt him and then finished him. But I think Means is going to be able to extend this fight. I think he's going to slow down Medic. I think he's going to land those boxing combinations. I think he's going to work the body with knees, front kicks, teeps, and is going to get some takedowns and eventually win this fight. I'm going to go with Tim Means via a third round TKO against Uros the Dr. Medic. Medic is good. He has knockout wins over Matthew Semmelsberger, knockout wins over Omar Morales, who's a very good technical striker. But I think Means has the more impressive wins throughout his UFC career, and he's fought the tougher competition. He is older, so, you got to take that into consideration. I mean, there's no denying that. but I think Means has more ways to win, and he can resort to another area of his game if the striking isn't going his way, where I don't think Medic has the ability to resort to grappling, takedowns, and potential submissions or top control. So give me Tim Means, second round TKO against Uros the Dr. Medic as a big underdog here. All right, up next we move to my favorite fight on the card in the 145-pound featherweight division between Jonathan JSP Pierce taking on David the Silent Assassin Onama. Onama versus Pierce is a very good fight. We know that the wrestling, grappling, top control, transitions, and just overall grinding style is going to go to the side of Jonathan Pierce. But we've seen David Onama get taken down. We've seen him get out-wrestled. We've seen him get tired. That is something that's going to play into the game of Jonathan Pierce the longer the fight goes. In the second round, the midpoint of the second and into the third, if those takedowns, top control, ground and pound, back control, transitions, and ability of JSP to win the scrambles, if that can start early and often, then I do think JSP has the ability to break a guy like David Onama and either get a ground and pound finish or a submission. But I think Onama is a guy that people have counted out too much, and myself included. We've counted him out because he leaves openings on the feet, he does get tired, he slows down, but the guy does not quit. He doesn't have quit in him. He's slowed down against Nate Landwehr after he hurt him multiple times, pretty much knocked him out like 3 times. Landwehr came back and Nate the Train kept on rolling and eventually got that job done by decision after Onama blew his gas tank in the first round. But we saw against a fighter who was known to be a much better grappler in Garrett Armfield, he was able to get the top control and get the arm triangle choke submission and put him out, when Onama is not known as a grappler. We saw in positions against a very solid jiu-jitsu artist in Gabriel Santos, where he got caught in an armbar multiple times. He got caught in a triangle. He was able to get his way out, get top control, avoid the submissions, and work his way back up. Now, the difference between those fights and a guy like Pierce is those guys are better in terms of jiu-jitsu, and JSP is better in terms of chain wrestling, getting takedowns, and really controlling position, much less looking for a submission. So the positional awareness and the positional control of JSP is going to be his biggest advantage in this fight against Onama. Coming forward, getting takedowns, but at the same time, he leaves himself in vulnerable positions just like he did against Joe Anderson Brito. Now, I think Brito is a more well-rounded fighter, but I think there are a lot of similarities between Onama and Joe Anderson Brito, but I think the more technical and sharper striker between the two is actually David Onama. And JSP does not have good striking on the feet. He's very good with grappling-based striking in terms of ground and pound, elbows, getting to the half guard, getting to the full mount, looking to tie up the arm with the Dagestani handcuff, wrist ride, wrist control, get control of one leg and kind of break the base of the opponent and look for ground and pound and change position between submission and ground and pound and go back and forth. That style is going to wear out a fighter like Onama, but Onama is able to find these openings that I think JSP is going to leave on the feet. He has very good uppercuts. He's got good 1-2s from orthodox and southpaw. He switches his stances. He throws good low kicks. He has really good knees up the middle to the body. He can change stances and land elbows from orthodox and southpaw and vice versa. Mid-stance change, like 1-2 from orthodox, switch southpaw, boom, land the left elbow, or 1-2 orthodox, switch southpaw, land the right elbow, which would be his lead side, follow up with the straight left hand, land an uppercut up the middle. He has very short uppercuts, and I think that can catch a guy like JSP. I would really favor him to throw more uppercuts for up the middle attacks than knees, because I don't think Onama wants to be on the ground at any point in this fight. It's going to be the floor is lava for David Onama. He doesn't want to be on his back. He doesn't want to potentially land a knee up the middle, get taken down, and get controlled. But JSP does not have good defensive striking. He gets hit a lot on the feet. Against Christian Rodriguez, he was able to win a lot of the positional grappling and really dominate that fight in terms of a wrestling perspective. But on the feet, he was getting pieced up by Christian Rodriguez with knees, elbows, uppercuts, 1-2s, and really just didn't have much in terms of striking defense. Against a fighter who's as dangerous and as technical as Onama, yes, Onama is going to leave openings himself because he doesn't really move his head and he's not the best defensively, but he's much better offensively in terms of the striking between himself and Pearce. So it's going to be the fact of, can Onama stop the takedowns, which I don't think he's going to be able to stop the takedowns for 15 minutes, but if he doesn't stop them, can he work his way back up to the feet? Can he defend submissions? And can he get to a striking base where he can land shots against a much less defensive fighter and much less technical fighter on the feet in Jonathan Pearce? The thing I do like about Onama is that he's not going to quit and he's going to continue to push the pace. But if those takedowns, the top control, the wrist rides, the back control, the submissions, the ground and pound, if that does slow down Onama early, I don't think he really can get a finish late in the fight. I think it's an early finish for Onama or a late finish for Jonathan Pearce. It's really a coin flip. Onama is like the plus 150 underdog. I think JSP is like minus 180. I'm going to take a shot on Onama because I feel like I count this guy out so many times and he just finds a way to dog these fights out. And I think he has much more dog in him than Jonathan Pearce. I know the Nate Landwehr fight is a bad look, but Landwehr has had a pretty successful UFC career, aside from a couple losses to Julian Erosa and, Dan Ige, but he doesn't quit either. So I'm going to go with Onama. I think he's going to find the openings on the feet. He's going to find the openings in boxing range with the 1-2s, with the uppercuts, with the stance-changing elbows and knees to the body. I think he is going to find those openings, and I think he's going to crack the chin of JSP and knock him out. I think Onama's even live for like a ninja choke here, kind of like Joe Anderson Brito got, where he was able to, time that head on the inside single and find the position and then lock up that ninja choke like we've seen so many fighters in the UFC do somewhat recently, such as Mayra Bueno Silva against Holly Holm. I think he's live to set up a ninja choke because of the takedowns. I think he's live to land a big knee, but I wouldn't recommend throwing a ton of knees against a grappler the level of JSP. But uppercuts, knees, ninja chokes, 1-2s, elbows off the stance change. I think Onama's live here, and I count him out so many times, and I might be, shooting myself in the foot here, but I'm going to go with the silent assassin. I'm going to go with David Onama to get the job done here via a second-round TKO. I think he's going to land one of those short uppercuts or a big elbow as JSP tries to close the distance, and I think he's going to jump on him and get the finish, or let him up and then just kind of land the more powerful shots in terms of the boxing, the 1-2s, the hooks, the elbows, and he's just going to put it on JSP, and JSP eventually is just going to get stopped via either a ground and pound TKO or a standing TKO. I would much rather think it's probably going to be a standing TKO where he hurts him. JSP covers up, but Onama just pours it on, stops a takedown. He works his way back up, uppercuts, body shots, 1-2s, rip into the body. I'll go with David Onama via a second round standing TKO as the plus 150 underdog against Jonathan Pearce. I feel like Pearce is live here and this pick could look terrible, but I keep counting out a guy like Onama, who I think is very solid, even though he does make a lot of mistakes. I think he's going to stay in the fight and have the heart to keep going and keep pushing, and he'll eventually find that kill shot on the feet. So give me David, the silent assassin Onama, to defeat Jonathan JSP Pearce via second round standing TKO at UFC Vegas 91. All right, the next fight up is going to be Ariane Lipsky taking on Karine Silva. I've tried to talk about this fight at least 3 or 4 times, and the recording keeps getting cut off and everything like that. I had this done already, but we're going to do it again. I think this fight is very interesting. I think Lipsky is at the point in her career where she's constantly being brought into these fights as an underdog, and it's going to get to a point where when is she going to get the respect to be opened up as a favorite? And when she is opened as a favorite, she's probably going to end up losing. Lipsky's on a 3-fight win streak with wins over J.J. Aldrich, most recently a submission victory over Casey O'Neill. She had a very nasty knee bar submission over Luana Carolina, I believe. And she has good jiu-jitsu. She's not afraid to fight off of her back, go for arm bars. She can get arm bars from awkward angles, even shooting far side arm bars from the opposite side. Can go for triangles, and her striking is very good. She does better in terms of like volume combinations from inside. She's better with being the pressure fighter, not so much when she's getting pressured. She's not the best counter striker. I think Silva is way too much for Lipsky on the feet. She throws good 1-2. She has good body kicks, good head kicks, and she seems to know her range a little bit better. I feel like she has her range management is better than Lipsky. And in a fight where Lipsky has really good jiu-jitsu, I don't think Silva is going to put herself in the positions for Lipsky's jiu-jitsu to be anything but defensive. And if she does throw up offensive submissions or triangles, arm bars, I think Silva can defend most of it. I think the best path to victory for Lipsky is to get on the inside, push Karine up against the cage, and try to land elbows, knees inside the clinch. Try to rough her up from inside. You have to make it dirty. You have to make it nasty. She's known as the queen of violence, so it makes sense. Good kickboxer, good lead kicks to the body, head kicks, low kicks, 1-2s down the middle. But she doesn't throw a bunch of combinations, but she seems to have gotten a lot more comfortable in her UFC career in the last few fights. I mean, she's on a 3-fight win streak, but I think this fight with Karine Silva is where the win streak ends. If I had to pick who I'd rather want to win, I would say I probably would rather have Lipsky, but I think Silva's just better than Lipsky everywhere, and unless Silva makes a critical error and gets caught in an armbar or a knee bar and goes into a position without respecting the game of Lipsky, she could get caught in a submission, but I don't think Lipsky's going to be able to outstrike her. I do know that the UFC experience is more on the side of Lipsky. We've talked about that a lot on this breakdown. But I think Silva's just better everywhere. I think she's cleaner on the feet. She's more technical. She's more comfortable with throwing her combinations. And she's aggressive enough with the grappling and offensive jiu-jitsu to the point where she's probably going to get into a scramble with Lipsky and probably will catch her in an armbar or catch her in a guillotine and end up getting a submission. I think Karine Silva gets the job done inside the distance. I think this fight ends inside the distance. But I'm not comfortable enough to tell you to play the side of Silva because of the career resurgence we've seen from Lipsky, but I do think it ends here, and I'm going to go with Karine Silva to get the job done via a first-round armbar submission. I think she's too crisp, too technical, and just too much for a fighter like Lipsky, but if I had to pick somebody, like I said, who I want to win, I would rather have Lipsky get the job done, but when I go off technique, when I go off the technical analysis, I do think Silva gets the job done. So give me Karine Silva to get this fight to the ground and get a first-round armbar submission. All right, and now we're up to the co-main event of the evening in the light heavyweight division between Ryan Superman Spann taking on Bogdan Gusov. I'm going to be honest, I think that this fight is a toss-up. I do not think that Spann should be a 2-1 favorite. I understand, like we've said multiple times, the UFC experience and that narrative plays heavy on this card, but Bogdan Gusov made his UFC debut against Volkan Oezdemir. He landed some good shots, but he eventually got dropped with 2 left hooks and then got submitted in the first round. He comes back, knocks out Zach Pauga as another big underdog. He comes in again as the underdog, knocks out Zach Pauga in the first round, a nasty, vicious knockout, and now he's again going to be the underdog against Ryan Spann. I would not feel comfortable making Ryan Spann the favorite in any fight in the light heavyweight division. He was a decently sized favorite, I believe, against Anthony Smith. I might be wrong. A lot of people thought Spann won that fight. He had a lot of damage, a lot of big moments, but then slowed down the longer the fight went, and then the fight ended up going the way of Anthony Smith on the decision for the judges' scorecards. First fight, he dropped him, hurt him, and then ended up choking him out, and then he comes back, gets the decision in the second fight. Spann has wins via first-round knockout against Dominic Reyes, where he basically knocked him out with a jab, followed up with a vicious right hand. It was a vicious, pretty much one-punch knockout, but he followed up with a vicious right hand. And then he goes and he submits Nikita Krylov, or I'm sorry, he gets submitted by Nikita Krylov. Back and forth, a lot of scrambles. Spann kept going for the arm and guillotine, kept, trying to switch to a guillotine. There was a lot of scrambles, and eventually Nikita Krylov just caught him in a triangle and ended up getting the tap. I think in this fight, I feel like Ryan Spann gets too much respect, but I do know that he is technically decent on the feet. He has big power in his boxing. He doesn't really use his kicks that much, but he can also get clipped. He can also get hurt. I think he's going to be the technically sharper striker. I think if he wants to win this fight, it would probably be, smart of him to resort to his wrestling and grappling. But we saw Gusov, even though he got submitted by Oezdemir, who doesn't have submissions in the UFC, he was able to recover guard pretty well. He looks for submissions off of his back. He doesn't just sit there. But again, I feel like he'll be outmatched on the ground, and I think that's where Spann can definitely take advantage. Even if he rocks him and hurts Gusov on the feet, he shoots a takedown and ends up grabbing his neck and submitting him. There's a lot of ways in which Spann can win this fight, but again, I would never be comfortable in picking a fighter like Ryan Spann, who shows glimpses of really solid work and really good promise, but seems to have a fight IQ issue. He seems to make mistakes, put the fight in positions where he doesn't need to be, and ends up costing himself those fights. Like against Johnny Walker, he hurt him like 4 times, shot a takedown up against the cage and then got knocked out with hammer fists and elbows. Continued to shoot the takedown after he got hit with like 10 unanswered shots. Even against Anthony Smith, I feel like that fight was there for the taking. He didn't push hard enough. He ended up losing. A knockout over Dominic Reyes, we know that Yuri Prochazka had a knockout over Dominic Reyes, really kind of took his soul after the loss to Jan Blachowicz. And then if you look at Gusov came into the UFC against Volkan Oezdemir, and the only other fighter who really made their debut in the UFC against Oezdemir is the man who's the former UFC light heavyweight champion in Yuri Prochazka. So you can't fault Gusov for losing, even though Prochazka got a KO in that fight. Oezdemir is no slouch. He's very, very solid, and he does have chin issues, but he can also hurt you and knock you out with very solid boxing and in knockout power, along with some decent jiu-jitsu like we saw in this fight. I think Spann has a clear advantage if it goes to the ground, but Gusov's hands-low style, stance switching, shifting, straight punches, uppercuts, hooks, they come from awkward angles. The problem is he does get hit. Spann has really good power, a good left hook, a good 1-2, and he can catch Gusov on the chin and knock him out. Pauga hurt him with a good shot early, but then eventually just got clipped and got finished. I feel like the movement and awkward style of Gusov with the hands low, the stance changes, the uppercuts, the overhands. He has a very Russian style where he kind of throws his hooks wide, but kind of throws it palm down. So, and they come from, like I said, really awkward angles, and it makes it hard to see. I think if Spann gets into exchanges, he's going to be the cleaner boxer, but he leaves his chin exposed, and I just feel like Gusov's going to find his chin before Ryan Spann finds the chin of Gusov. I think if this is a striking matchup, I favor the more awkward striker with the hands-low style because it's going to be harder for Spann to prepare for that hands-low style. Obviously, he has the power to step in, clip Gusov, and knock him out, but I think Gusov's hands low, the stance changes, the Russian style with the thumb down or palm down, coming with awkward uppercuts, shovel hooks, overhands. I think he's going to be able to find the chin of Spann, and I think this guy has enough power to knock out Superman. I'm going to go with Bogdan Gusov again as an underdog. I feel like he's going to clip the chin of Ryan Spann, and although I feel like Spann obviously has better competition, he is the better fighter technically, I think the awkward style of Gusov and the awkward trajectory and angles of his punches, like I said, is going to make it hard for Spann to see them and make it harder for him to see them, and I think he's going to clip that chin early, hurt him, and knock him out. I'm going with Bogdan Gusov again as the underdog to get the job done via a first-round knockout against Ryan Spann. I just can't trust the fight IQ of Spann. Spann should win this fight, but I don't think Spann is somebody that you can confidently trust at this point in his career. So give me Bogdan Gusov, first round KO in the co-main event, and another win in his UFC career, going 2-0 in his last 2 fights. Now we move to the main event in the UFC's flyweight division between former title challenger and Alex Perez, coming off a decision loss, but a competitive one, to Muhammad Mokaev, taking on Mateusz Nicolau. I think this is a great fight. Do I think it should be the main event? No, but do I think it's a bad main event? No, I think this is going to be a good fight. I think this is going to be competitive. I thought Alex Perez was going to get run over by Mokaev, and he didn't. He stuffed a lot of takedowns, showcased good takedown defense, worked his way back up, tried to land some good punches, and arguably could have got that decision. The fight was close enough when I went back and rewatched it to where I could have seen them giving that decision to Alex Perez against a guy who was thought to be and touted to be the future champion of the division, the uncrowned champion of the division. Perez lost his title shot against Davison Figueiredo, after Figueiredo was caught in a single leg, he jumped into like a scissor sweep leg lock and then got caught into a scramble with Perez and ended up getting a first-round guillotine choke. Perez goes, he tries to fight, or he goes and fights the now current UFC flyweight champion in Alexandre Pantoja, gets submitted in the first round, but he comes forward, tries to get into exchanges, and just kind of fought stupid and made some fight IQ mistakes in that fight, I feel like. Perez is going to be the more active striker. Perez is going to be, I feel like, the better offensive and defensive wrestler. Nicolau is going to be the better counter striker. Nicolau never throws a ton of volume, but he likes to use that lead hand. He's very, very lead hand heavy with his strikes. He uses good lateral movement. He moves in and out, lands good left hooks, circles away, 1-2, jab, feint in, feint the rear hand, come through with the left hook like he dropped Matt Schnell with. I think that the better overall technical fighter is Matheus Nicolau, but I think the durability of Nicolau is the biggest concern against a fighter who hits as hard and has as much volume as Alex Perez. I feel like Perez, if anybody gets clipped and finished in this fight, I do think it's going to be Nicolau getting clipped and finished. And the only reason I say that is because even in fights that Nicolau has won, we've seen him get rocked, we've seen him get wobbled, we've seen him get hurt, we've seen him get dropped. Usually he has enough fight IQ to survive, but he should have technically gotten finished against Manel Kape. Kape, got taken down, got out-wrestled. We saw the counter-wrestling of Nicolau on display there. I don't think Nicolau is going to be able to out-wrestle Alex Perez if he gets clipped on the chin and gets hurt. I think that's the biggest difference here because we've seen when Nicolau has gotten hurt, he can resort to counter takedowns and counter wrestling. Perez has too good of defensive wrestling, especially with what I saw against Mokaev, to think that I don't think Nicolau gets a takedown in this fight. I think if anybody gets an offensive takedown, it's Alex Perez, and I think the defensive wrestling of Perez is good enough to defend the wrestling of Nicolau. And Nicolau does have decent power in his punches, but he more point fights. He has a point fighting style. I don't think he's going to be able to outpoint Alex Perez over 25 minutes. I don't think he's going to be able to outpoint him for 3 or 4 out of the 5 rounds without getting clipped, without getting hurt. The calf kicks of Alex Perez are very, very solid. We saw him knock out Jussier Formiga with calf kicks. I think he's going to use those calf kicks. He's going to have to watch out for the counter right hand, the counter left hook as he tries to step in. But if he can slip or roll that counter left hook and follow up with a rear low kick, if he can time the jab and then follow up with an inside or outside low kick, I don't see Nicolau really shooting takedowns offensively. And even if he does, like I said, I don't think he gets them. I think Perez has more power. I think Perez, even though he's been finished, he's more durable in terms of his chin. I worry about the chin of Matheus Nicolau. He got hit with that big knee and then that straight punch right after from Royval and got finished. But it's not just that. It's like we said earlier, all the times we've seen Nicolau get hurt, we've seen him get wobbled, we've seen him get rocked, we've seen him get dropped. And I think a fighter who has the experience level of an Alex Perez, yes, he's had a lot of injuries, yes, he's had a lot of time off, a lot of weight misses, but he came into that fight against Mokaev, and he did much, much better than anybody thought. Everybody and their mother was on Mokaev, and most people were on Mokaev by finish. Mokaev did come into that fight hurt. He came into that fight sick. You do have to take that into consideration when breaking the fight down, but I see Perez as the more active striker. I see Perez as the striker with more power. I see Perez as the fighter with better defensive wrestling, who's going to be able to stop the takedowns of a Matheus Nicolau and potentially counter the takedowns with a guillotine, even though I wouldn't recommend it. And I think if anybody's going to get hurt in this fight, it is going to be the guy with more durability issues in Matheus Nicolau. I know we've seen Perez get submitted, get his back taken, but he showed very good defensive wrestling and defensive jiu-jitsu, ability to work his way back up to the feet in that Mokaev fight. Maybe I'm taking too much stock in the Muhammad Mokaev performance, and Mokaev was sick, but I think Alex Perez wins this fight. I think Perez comes in here, chops those calf kicks, puts his boxing combinations together, touch, 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 rip. He has very solid technical boxing, puts 3, 4, 5, 6 punches together. He has more power than Nicolau. Everybody's going to think because Nicolau knocked out Matt Schnell that that's a big win, but Schnell kind of gets clipped and knocked out by everybody. Just ask Steve Erceg, and now Erceg's fighting for the title. I like Nicolau. I think I'm a bigger fan of Nicolau, but I think Perez wins this one, man. I think he has the finishing equity. I think he has the better offensive and defensive wrestling. I think he has more volume on the feet, and I think he hits harder in terms of putting his combinations together. I'm taking Alex Perez. I'm taking the former title challenger in Alex Perez to get the job done by a knockout. I'm going to take Alex Perez via third-round TKO against Matheus Nicolau in the main event of UFC Vegas 91. All right, that's going to be it for my UFC Vegas 91 breakdown. You can find this podcast on the exact channel you're watching it at the Touch 'Em Up podcast. I did used to record a lot of audio podcasts. I'll probably go back to it. The only reason I stopped is because I don't really get a lot of views on the audio podcast. It's a lot more traffic when it comes to the YouTube videos, but I'm going to have more breakdowns out. I'm going to try to get some fighter interviews, but do me a favor, smash the like button, hit a calf kick on the notification bell, and make sure to smash that subscribe button with a step-in elbow so you don't miss any uploads from the premier mixed martial arts and professional wrestling channel on YouTube known as the Touch 'Em Up Podcast. I'm your host, Double M, and I hope you have a great night. Enjoy the fights this upcoming weekend.